So today we have a somewhat serious video. This trike crash video that I just shared in the intro was posted online a couple days ago, and it's been making the rounds, gaining some views, and it's been getting a lot of unnecessary hate. Since this video was posted, I've done some research on the backstory, and in this video, I kind of want to break down some of the factors that were involved because I think there's a lot of really good lessons to learn from this incident. Before we get into the actual video though, my disclaimer here is that obviously I was not present. This is not a full NTSB investigation. Additionally, for the YouTube employee that will inevitably be reviewing this video is made for educational purposes in order to make the sport safer. Aside from that, if you find this video valuable and you like what we do here on the channel, check out Risky Biscuits Co., tuckergott.com. We've got all kinds of cool paramotor related merch, and we also have ozone wings, harnesses, reserves, wing bags, all kinds of cool stuff, even E-Props propellers. So check it out. Let's get into the video and then I'll tell you guys my thoughts on it afterwards.
Inflation. There you go. All right, get your speed there, Johnny. Look out. Guys, that's not. What the fuck? You better call 911.
So my initial reaction when I first saw this video was confusion. Obviously, the flight went horribly wrong, but why did it go horribly wrong? That's when I started reading some Facebook comments from people that were here at the site of the incident and started to put together the backstory, and everything started to make more sense. So what I've gathered is that the pilot of this paramotor was a 72-year-old man who is battling cancer and is learning to fly. He had been attending training, which is good, but apparently this was only his 4th flight on a paramotor. Now, the main cause of this incident is an oscillation, and we're going to talk about oscillations and dive deep into that next. But the reason it seems the pilot entered an oscillation was because they're saying he blacked out shortly after takeoff. That means he basically gave 0 input to the glider for the entire flight, and he held full throttle for basically the entire flight. And what you saw happen right after takeoff through the entire flight was a result of that. The pilot blacking out, not giving any input, and just holding full power. The aftermath of this crash, unfortunately, the pilot apparently broke his neck and his back. He is fortunate to be alive because this could have gone much worse, but it does sound like he's recovering. I don't think he has any plans of flying paramotors in the future, which is understandable. But what I really want to dive into here is oscillations. Now, oscillations basically meaning a pendulum. If you have a pendulum and it swings back and forth, a paramotor is essentially a pendulum in the sky. So oscillations are something that we want to consider and you learn about when you go to a proper training course. So as far as oscillations go, gear has a major impact on if a setup in particular will have a tendency to oscillate. So here are some of the factors that can cause oscillations. When you look at the difference between a trike and a foot-launched paramotor, typically trikes have more of a tendency to oscillate. Now on a foot-launched paramotor, typically you have weight shift, and that weight shift kind of dampens the effects of an oscillation, whereas a trike has a fixed hang point. Now certain gliders have more of a tendency to oscillate than others. Typically more advanced gliders, like unrated slalom gliders, they're designed to roll really fast. That's part of the design, and the downside of that is that they don't want to fly in a straight line by themselves. So my glider, the Free Ride, an advanced unrated glider, if I go hands off and I hit turbulence, that glider will start oscillating. But I have the skills and knowledge to dampen that oscillation without even really thinking about it. A beginner glider is meant to not oscillate so much. However, there is another factor, which is overloading your glider that can cause it to oscillate more so, even if it is a beginner glider. Along that same trend, even if you have a beginner glider, holding full power can induce oscillations and keep oscillations building. Along those same lines, even if you have a beginner glider, having the trims wide open or flying the glider faster can also increase the tendency for oscillations. And another factor is turbulence. That's kind of like the outside effect on your aircraft. Turbulence can start oscillations and they can increase them as opposed to flying in smooth air. So a perfect example of this was when I recently did the Taco Bell flight. I was flying a Mojo, which is a beginner glider, a very friendly glider. However, I was overloading it on my trike. I had that glider trimmed out fully, and I was flying through turbulence. I had my brakes stowed, and I had full power as I was climbing, leaving Taco Bell. Now, at one point in that video, I didn't really share it too much because it wasn't relevant at the time, but my whole setup started oscillating pretty big, wingtip to the horizon type oscillations as I was trying to get my burrito out, at which point I had to reach up and grab my brakes and stop that oscillation. Now, for me, that's no big deal. However, if a beginner found themselves in that situation, flying that configuration with all of those factors grouped in, they could get very freaked out. They could make the oscillation worse. They may not even know what to do. They might do nothing. And it can become a very scary situation when that thing is just swinging back and forth and you don't know what to do. So that's where we go to training. How do you fix an oscillation? My friends at Aviator Paramotor, which is a school I learned to fly at and the one I always recommend you guys go to, they actually take students up on tandem flights before they do their first solo flights, and part of the tandem flight is learning oscillation control. So on the trike, you can pass the brake toggles to the passenger up in the front, and the instructor can induce an oscillation by yanking on the brake and just getting that thing swinging back and forth. At which point they can instruct the student to stop the oscillation and give them feedback on if they did it right and how to do it better. Typically, the way you want to stop an oscillation, the way I tell people, is if you're swinging to the right, you wait till you're all the way to the right and the glider's coming back to the left, at which point you add right brake and jab that brake and just stop it right in the middle and then come back to level flight. That's the ideal situation if you do everything right. You stop it in one single cycle. However, if you don't know what you're doing and you mistime it, you actually make the oscillation worse and it continues to build. That's why getting that practice on the tandem trike ahead of time is super important and valuable. Another thing you can do if you're in an oscillation and you really need to get out of it is reduce power. Typically, when you have more than cruise power, full throttle, that makes the oscillation worse, and reducing down below cruise or to idle and starting a descent even can help you get out of the oscillation. It's removing the torque from the whole equation, but that's kind of worst case scenario. For most people, oscillations aren't a big deal, but it is something that's really important to be aware of. This video is a very extreme example of an oscillation. Typically, they go wingtip to the horizon and don't build much bigger. But in this case, it developed so big into a full-on wing over, and the pilot obviously wasn't giving any input. The glider gained so much energy coming over the top in a wing over, pointing right at the sky, that the glider became unloaded and the trike actually fell back into the lines, catching the slack. That's about all I've got on this situation. If you guys have more information, feel free to comment down below. Drop a like if you learned something. Check out tuckergott.com for Risky Biscuits Co. merch and Ozone products. With that, have fun, fly safe. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.